A millionaire walks past a homeless boy every day, until one night, a shocking truth changes everything. The boy isn't just a stranger, he's his long-lost son. But will the father accept him, or will the past keep them apart forever? Stay till the end to witness a story of heartbreak, redemption, and an unexpected twist. The streets of New York buzzed with life as neon signs flickered above expensive boutiques and high-end restaurants. People in tailored suits and elegant dresses passed by, engaged in lively conversations or lost in their own worlds. Among the city's towering skyscrapers and endless rush, no one noticed the 17-year-old boy sitting on the cold pavement near the entrance of a luxury restaurant. His name was Colby. Dressed in a worn-out hoodie and faded jeans, he didn't look like the typical homeless person. His face wasn't yet hardened by years of street life, and his sharp, intelligent eyes suggested a past that had not always been this way. His hands, tucked into his sleeves to fight off the biting evening air, clutched a small silver pendant around his neck. He traced its edges absent-mindedly, a habit whenever his thoughts drifted too far. Every evening, at exactly 7:45 p.m., a man passed by. Always the same. Garrison Bailey. A powerful name in the city, a self-made millionaire, the owner of a prestigious restaurant empire. He walked with purpose, his tailored suit perfectly fitted, his leather shoes barely making a sound against the pavement. People made way for him. Waiters at the restaurant's entrance bowed slightly as he walked past. He never looked down, never noticed the boy sitting just a few feet from his path. Colby had been watching him for weeks. His breath caught in his throat every time he saw Garrison approach. His heart pounded as if trying to leap out of his chest. But each time, the man walked past, oblivious to the boy's presence. It was as if Colby was invisible. Yet, Colby knew the truth. This man, this powerful, respected businessman, was his father. The knowledge burned inside him like a secret too painful to hold. His mother had never spoken of Garrison, never told him the full story. But Colby had found the evidence, an old photograph buried in her belongings. In it, a much younger Garrison held a baby in his arms, his eyes filled with something almost tender. On the back of the picture, written in faded ink, were the words, "Garrison and Colby, my whole world." Colby had no memory of his father. He had only ever known life with his mother, Alice. And then, one day, even she was gone, leaving him alone in a world that didn't care if he lived or died. That was when he had decided to find the man in the photograph. But what would he even say? "Hey, you don't know me, but I'm your son. The one you left behind." The words felt bitter, heavy, like stones in his mouth. Instead, he sat. Waiting. Hoping. Tonight, as the evening crowd thickened, Colby saw him again, Garrison, walking toward the restaurant. The familiar routine played out. The businessman strode past, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, confident tones. Colby clenched his fists. How could he walk past him every day and not feel anything? How could he not sense the connection, the unspoken truth hanging in the air? His heart screamed for him to stand up, to shout, to force the man to look at him. But fear kept him frozen. He had already lost so much. What if he reached out and found nothing? What if Garrison Bailey looked him in the eyes and saw only a stranger? That, somehow, would be worse than being ignored. Colby wasn't always homeless. There was a time when he had a home, small, but warm. A time when he had a mother who smiled at him every morning and kissed his forehead at night, even when she was exhausted from working double shifts. Alice was his entire world. She had worked as a waitress in a diner on the Lower East Side, always coming home smelling like coffee and grilled cheese. She never complained about being tired, never let him see how hard things were. No matter how little money they had, she always made sure Colby had food, clean clothes, and a safe place to sleep. But there was one thing she never talked about. His father. Colby had asked about him a few times when he was younger. The first time, Alice had just smiled sadly and ruffled his hair. "Some people aren't meant to stay, baby," she had said. "But that doesn't mean you weren't loved." The second time he asked, she changed the subject. By the time he was a teenager, he had stopped asking. He figured if she wanted him to know, she would tell him. And then, she was gone. It happened fast. Too fast. One moment, she was fine, just a little more tired than usual. The next, she was in the hospital, her skin pale, her voice barely above a whisper. Colby had held her hand as she told him she was sorry. "I wanted more time," she had said, her fingers weak in his grasp. And then, she was gone. There was no savings, no will, nothing left behind except for a few boxes of their things and the apartment they couldn't afford. In less than a month, Colby found himself on the streets, clutching the only thing that mattered to him, a small wooden box containing his mother's most precious belongings. It was in that box that he found the photograph. A young Alice, laughing, her head tilted toward the man beside her. And there, holding a baby in his arms, was Garrison Bailey. Colby had stared at the picture for what felt like hours, his mind racing. The back of the photo held the proof he needed. Garrison and Colby, my whole world. He had a father. A man who had never been there, never called, never come looking for them. But a man who, according to this photo, had once held him like he mattered. Colby had nothing left. Nowhere to go. So he made a decision. He would find Garrison Bailey. And when he did, he would demand answers. "Why did you leave? Did you know about me? Do you even care?" But finding him was one thing. Confronting him was another. So instead of storming into his office, instead of showing up at his mansion, Colby watched from a distance. He waited outside the restaurant, studying him, memorizing the way he walked, the way he talked. Every time Garrison walked past him, Colby felt the weight of his mother's absence pressing on his chest. Would she have wanted this? Would she have wanted him to find the man who abandoned them? He didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't stop now. The night air was cold, sharp against Colby's skin as he huddled near the restaurant's entrance. The city never slept, but the streets felt emptier at this hour. Most people were inside, sheltered by warm lights and soft music, enjoying meals they didn't have to think twice about affording. Colby had grown used to hunger. His stomach ached, but he ignored it, just like he ignored the dull pain in his legs from sitting too long. He wasn't here for food. He was waiting, watching. Garrison Bailey would be leaving soon. Colby had memorized his routine. Every night, around 10 p.m., Garrison exited the restaurant, either alone or with business associates. He'd step into the back seat of a sleek black car, driven by the same uniformed chauffeur. The doors would shut, and within seconds, he'd be gone, disappearing into a life that Colby had never been a part of. Tonight, Colby was determined. He wasn't just going to sit and watch. He was going to do something. But just as he gathered the courage to stand, a shadow loomed over him. "Hey, kid," a gruff voice said. Colby barely had time to react before a rough hand grabbed his hoodie and yanked him to his feet. He stumbled, nearly falling backward, but another shove pressed him hard against the cold brick wall of the building. Two men stood in front of him. Street guys, homeless like him, but not the kind who kept to themselves. These were the kind who preyed on others, looking for an easy target. "Been seein' you sittin' here for weeks," the taller one sneered, his breath heavy with the stench of alcohol. "What, you think this spot is yours?" Colby swallowed, his heart racing. He knew how this worked. The streets had their own unspoken rules, and staying in the same place too long made you a target. "I don't want trouble," he muttered, keeping his voice steady. The shorter man, wiry and jittery, laughed. "Trouble's already here, kid." Before Colby could react, a fist slammed into his stomach. Pain exploded through his ribs as he doubled over, gasping for air. His fingers instinctively clutched at his hoodie, protecting his most valuable possession, the small wooden box with his mother's belongings, tucked deep inside his bag. The taller man grabbed his backpack and yanked. "Please," Colby croaked, his voice raw. "That's all I have." But they didn't care. The shorter man shoved him again, sending him crashing onto the pavement. His head hit the edge of the sidewalk, and for a moment, the world blurred. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. "Hey!" Deep. Sharp. Commanding. The attackers froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. Colby barely managed to lift his gaze, his vision still spinning. And there, standing a few feet away, was Garrison Bailey. The man looked different from how Colby usually saw him. Gone was the calm, composed businessman with his measured steps and effortless confidence. His sharp features were set in a hard glare, his expensive coat billowing slightly in the cold wind. "Step away from him," Garrison ordered, his voice steel. The two men hesitated, but only for a second. They weren't stupid. They could tell by his clothes, his presence, that this wasn't someone to mess with. Without another word, they turned and disappeared into the night. Silence settled between them. Colby lay on the pavement, breathing heavily. His ribs throbbed, his lip was split, and his pride felt just as battered as his body. Garrison took a step forward. "Are you all right?" Colby wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, wincing at the sting. He felt the weight of Garrison's gaze, but he didn't look up. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Not like this. And yet, the words tumbled from his lips before he could stop them. You're my father." A gust of wind howled through the streets. Garrison didn't move. Didn't speak. His expression barely shifted, but something flickered in his eyes, something Colby couldn't quite read. Then, after a long, heavy pause, Garrison exhaled. "What did you just say?" The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Colby could see the flicker of hesitation in Garrison's expression, like a man who had just heard something impossible, something he couldn't quite process. The streetlights cast a harsh glow over them, highlighting every bruise on Colby's face, every tear in his hoodie. His breath was still uneven, his ribs aching from the assault, but none of that mattered right now. Garrison took a slow step closer. His face, unreadable just seconds ago, was now clouded with something Colby couldn't quite name. Confusion? Doubt? Guilt? "What did you just say?" Garrison asked again, his voice quieter this time, as if testing the words. Colby forced himself to stand, despite the pain shooting through his side. His fists clenched at his sides as he met the man's gaze. "You heard me," he said. "I'm your son." Silence. Garrison blinked, once, then twice, as if trying to make sense of what was happening. His head tilted slightly, his sharp features drawn tight with tension. "That's not possible," he finally said, shaking his head. Colby scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. He reached into his hoodie pocket, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled out the photograph, the one he had carried with him ever since his mother died. He held it up, his grip tightening. "This says otherwise." Garrison hesitated before stepping forward, his eyes dropping to the old, slightly crumpled photo. For a moment, his expression remained unreadable. But then Colby saw it, the flicker of recognition, the way his shoulders stiffened, how his lips parted just slightly before pressing into a thin line. He knew. Colby saw it in his eyes. The older man took the photograph carefully, as if it might burn him. His gaze lingered on the image, on the younger version of himself, holding a baby in his arms, standing beside Alice. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was something behind it, something dangerous. Colby squared his shoulders. "My mom kept it. I found it after she died." Garrison looked up sharply. Alice is dead, Colby said flatly. A few months ago. The word hit like a bullet. Garrison didn't flinch, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly, an almost imperceptible crack in the mask he wore. His fingers curled around the edge of the photo before he handed it back. He exhaled, shaking his head. I didn't know. Colby's stomach twisted. The anger, the resentment, the years of unanswered questions boiled inside him. Yeah, he snapped. And whose fault is that? Garrison's eyes darkened, but he didn't immediately respond. Colby took a step closer, ignoring the way his ribs protested. You left her. You left us. I spent my whole life wondering who my father was, and now I find out he's been walking past me every single day without even noticing. Garrison's face remained impassive, but Colby saw the way his hands tensed at his sides. I didn't know about you, he said evenly. Alice never told me she was pregnant. Colby's breath hitched. For a moment, the anger inside him faltered, replaced by something else. Doubt. Confusion. You expect me to believe that? Garrison's jaw clenched. I don't expect anything from you. Colby stared at him, searching for any sign of a lie. But there was nothing. Just cold, steady truth. His head swam. His mother had never spoken about Garrison, never let on that she had even tried to reach him. And now he was standing here, claiming he had never known. Had she hidden the truth from him? Why? He swallowed hard, his throat dry. You really didn't know? Garrison didn't break eye contact. No. Colby wanted to be angry, wanted to shout, wanted to accuse him of lying. But if Garrison had known, if he had truly abandoned them, knowing the truth, wouldn't his reaction be different? The silence between them stretched, thick with things neither of them knew how to say. Then, finally, Garrison exhaled. He glanced at Colby's bruised face, at the way he held his ribs, and something flickered in his gaze, something Colby wasn't used to seeing from anyone. Concern. Come with me, Garrison said suddenly. Colby stiffened. What? You need medical attention, Garrison stated, his voice brisk, as if he were issuing an order in a boardroom. And food. You're coming with me. Colby wanted to refuse. His pride screamed at him to say no. But his body ached, his stomach was empty, and he had no other place to go. So, after a long pause, he nodded. He followed Garrison Bailey into the car, unsure if he was stepping into something better. Or something far worse. The car was silent except for the faint hum of the engine as it moved through the city streets. The plush leather seats felt foreign to Colby, too soft, too expensive, too far from the life he knew. He sat stiffly, his body tense, as if he didn't belong here. Because he didn't. Garrison sat beside him, staring out the window, deep in thought. His posture was relaxed, one arm resting on the door, but there was an unmistakable tightness in his jaw. He wasn't as unaffected as he pretended to be. Colby shifted uncomfortably, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. He hated the fact that he had accepted this ride, but his body had already made the decision for him. The fight with those men had drained him, and though he wouldn't admit it out loud, he needed help. Garrison finally broke the silence. How long have you been living on the streets? Colby exhaled sharply. Why do you care? Garrison's gaze flicked toward him, unreadable. You don't have to answer, he said. I just need to know if you have anywhere to go. Colby scoffed. If I had somewhere to go, do you think I'd be sitting outside your restaurant every night? Silence. Garrison didn't argue, and somehow, that irritated Colby even more. He expected denial, excuses, something. Instead, Garrison just accepted the truth for what it was. You said Alice never told me about you, Colby continued, his voice sharp. If that's true, why did she keep that photo? Why did she write Garrison and Colby, my whole world on the back? Garrison's expression barely changed, but his fingers curled slightly against his knee. I don't know, he admitted. The last time I saw Alice, we weren't in a good place. She told me she didn't want me in her life anymore. Colby frowned. Why? A long pause. Garrison didn't answer immediately, as if carefully choosing his words. I wasn't the man she deserved, he finally said. I was selfish. Too focused on my career. I thought I had all the time in the world. His voice was even, controlled, but there was something beneath it, regret. Colby studied him carefully, trying to see past the composed mask. So you just left? Garrison exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. She pushed me away. And I let her. Something inside Colby twisted. He wanted to be furious, wanted to hate this man. But he couldn't ignore the fact that his mother had never told him about Garrison. If she had kept the pregnancy a secret, if she had never reached out, then how could Garrison have known? Still, it didn't erase the fact that Colby had spent years believing he had no father, while this man had lived in luxury, unaware. You have no idea what it was like, Colby muttered. His voice was low, rough, laced with years of pain. Watching her work herself to death. Watching her smile at me like everything was fine, even when I knew we barely had enough to make rent. His throat tightened, but he refused to let himself break. And when she got sick, it happened so fast. One moment she was laughing, and the next, he stopped himself, jaw clenched. Garrison didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. Colby forced himself to continue. I sat in that hospital room every day, waiting for her to get better. But she didn't. She just kept getting weaker. He swallowed, his fingers digging into the hem of his hoodie. The last thing she said to me was I wanted more time. And then she was gone. The words felt like shards of glass in his throat, cutting with every syllable. He had never said them out loud before. The car slowed as they approached a large building, tall, sleek, and unmistakably expensive. Garrison's home. Colby turned to him. You have everything, he said, voice almost a whisper. And I had nothing. Garrison finally met his gaze. I know, he said quietly. And for the first time, Colby believed him. The car rolled to a stop, but neither of them moved. The weight of years of absence, of loss, of resentment, settled between them like a heavy fog. Then, after a long pause, Garrison reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times before speaking again. I ordered a doctor to come to the apartment, he said. You need medical attention. Colby narrowed his eyes. I never said I was staying. Garrison raised an eyebrow. Are you planning on sleeping on the streets again tonight? Colby clenched his jaw. He hated that he didn't have an answer. I'm not asking for anything, Garrison continued. I just want to make sure you're okay. Colby hesitated. Every part of him wanted to refuse. But his ribs ached, his face was sore, and exhaustion pulled at him like a weight he couldn't shake. He swallowed hard and nodded, just once. Garrison stepped out first, and Colby followed, stepping into a world that had never been his. Until now, Colby followed Garrison into the building, his steps slow, hesitant. The lobby alone looked like something out of a movie, high ceilings, marble floors, a chandelier that cast a soft golden glow over everything. It smelled clean, expensive, like polished wood and fresh linen. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at them before nodding in recognition. No ID check, no questions, Garrison Bailey didn't need permission to be anywhere. Colby shoved his hands into his hoodie pockets, suddenly hyper-aware of how out of place he looked. He could feel the weight of the grime on his skin, the stiffness of his unwashed clothes. His reflection in the polished elevator doors showed every bruise on his face, every shadow under his eyes. He looked like a stranger in this world. The elevator ride was silent. Garrison stood next to him, unreadable as ever, his hands in the pockets of his sleek, tailored coat. Colby could feel him watching but didn't turn to meet his gaze. When the doors slid open, they stepped into a long, dimly lit hallway. Garrison led the way to a sleek, dark wooden door. A quick swipe of a key card, and they were inside. Colby barely managed to keep his expression neutral. The penthouse was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across one side, overlooking the glowing city skyline. The living room was all clean lines and dark leather furniture, a modern fireplace flickering beneath a massive flat-screen TV. Everything about the place screamed wealth. Colby felt like an intruder just standing here. "Sit down," Garrison instructed, gesturing toward the couch. Colby hesitated but obeyed, lowering himself onto the smooth leather, wincing as his ribs protested. Garrison shrugged off his coat and disappeared down a hallway. A moment later, he returned with a first aid kit. Colby's brows furrowed. "You keep that around for guests or something?" Garrison didn't react to the sarcasm. "No. For myself." He set the kit on the coffee table and knelt in front of Colby. Before the boy could protest, he reached out, tilting Colby's face slightly to examine the bruises. Colby stiffened. He wasn't used to people touching him, especially not like this. Not with concern. Garrison's gaze was sharp, assessing. "They got you pretty good." "No kidding," Colby muttered. Garrison didn't respond. He simply opened the first aid kit and pulled out some antiseptic wipes. "This might sting." Colby braced himself, but still hissed when the cool antiseptic touched his split lip. "You don't have to do this," he muttered, watching Garrison work. "Maybe not," Garrison said, dabbing carefully at a cut on Colby's cheekbone. "But I am." Colby didn't know how to respond to that. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic below, the rustling of bandages as Garrison worked in silence. When he finally finished, he leaned back, studying Colby as if seeing him properly for the first time. "Are you hungry?" Colby hesitated. His pride wanted to say no, but his stomach betrayed him with a low, audible growl. Garrison stood. "I'll take that as a yes." He disappeared into the kitchen, and Colby sat there, feeling strangely off balance. He didn't know what was worse, the complete indifference he had expected from this man, or the quiet care he was showing instead. A few minutes later, Garrison returned with a plate of food. Nothing extravagant, just a simple sandwich and a glass of water. He set it in front of Colby without a word. Colby stared at it for a moment. Then, hunger won over hesitation, and he picked up the sandwich, taking a careful bite. It was the best thing he had eaten in weeks. As he chewed, Garrison sat across from him, studying him again with that unreadable expression. "I need to know something," he finally said. Colby swallowed. "What? Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Colby scoffed, setting the sandwich down. "Yeah, because that would have gone great. What was I supposed to do? Show up in your office like, 'Hey, remember that woman you left behind years ago? Turns out you have a kid.'" Garrison didn't flinch. "I wouldn't have turned you away." "You don't know that." Garrison exhaled. "You're right. I don't. But I should have known about you, and that's my fault." Colby frowned. "She never told you." "I should have checked." His voice was firm, as if he had already decided that no matter what, this was his failure to bear. Colby looked away. He wasn't sure what to do with that. Garrison leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "You don't have to stay here, but you do need help. Let me do that much." Colby stared at him. The smart thing would be to leave. He had survived on his own this long. He didn't need handouts from a man who had never been there for him. But as he sat there, warm, full for the first time in weeks, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, he realized he wasn't sure how much longer he could do this alone. Just for tonight, he finally muttered. Garrison nodded, as if he had expected that answer. Colby leaned back into the couch, feeling his body relax against his will. He didn't trust this man. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in a long time, he felt safe. Colby woke up feeling something unfamiliar, warmth. For a moment, his mind was still caught between dreams and reality, expecting to see the cold pavement beneath him, expecting the sharp bite of the city wind against his skin. But instead, he was lying on a bed. A real bed. His eyes opened slowly. The room was dimly lit, the early morning sun filtering through half-open blinds. It was massive, too, bigger than the entire apartment he had shared with his mom. The walls were a deep charcoal color, the furniture sleek and modern, yet minimal. It was clearly a guest room, yet it felt untouched, like no one had ever actually stayed in it. For a moment, he just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting himself feel the strange sensation of comfort. Then reality hit him like a freight train. He was in his father's house. Colby sat up too fast, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. His body still ached from the fight, but it was manageable. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his messy hair, and glanced around the room. His backpack sat on a chair near the window, untouched. At least nothing was taken. Not that he had much to lose. A knock at the door made him tense. "Come in," he said cautiously. The door opened, and Garrison stepped inside, looking as put together as ever. He was dressed in a crisp, tailored button-down with the sleeves rolled up slightly, his hair still neatly styled despite the early hour. He carried 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the nightstand. "I figured you could use some caffeine," he said. Colby eyed him warily before picking up the cup. It was still hot. He hesitated, then took a cautious sip. It was strong, probably the expensive kind, nothing like the watered-down gas station coffee he was used to. "You slept for almost 10 hours, Garrison continued, sitting in the chair near the bed. "I assume that's not normal for you." Colby shrugged. "Depends on the night." "You get into fights often?" Colby tensed, gripping the coffee cup a little tighter. "Not usually." Garrison studied him for a long moment, his gaze sharp, unreadable. "You said something last night," he finally said. "That you didn't have anywhere to go." Colby kept his expression neutral. "Yeah. And I want to change that." Colby let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right. Because you suddenly care." Garrison didn't flinch at the accusation. "Because I should have been there sooner," he corrected. Colby looked away. He wasn't sure what to do with that. "I don't need your pity," he muttered. "This isn't about pity." Garrison leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're my son. Whether you believe it or not, that matters to me." Colby's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. He wanted to believe him. He wanted to trust that this wasn't just some guilt-driven obligation. But how could he? For 17 years, this man had been a ghost. And now, suddenly, he wanted to be a father. "What exactly are you offering?" Colby asked, his voice cautious. "A place to stay. A chance to figure things out," Garrison said simply. "No pressure, no expectations. Just time." Colby frowned. "And what do you get out of this?" Garrison's lips pressed into a thin line. "A chance to do the right thing." The word settled between them, heavy with meaning. Colby stared at him, searching for any sign of dishonesty. But Garrison's face remained steady, his expression serious but not forceful. He wasn't demanding anything. And maybe that was what made Colby hesitate. Because the truth was, he was tired. Tired of running, tired of waking up every day not knowing where his next meal was coming from. Tired of feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. So, against every instinct telling him to walk away, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said. "I'll stay. For now." Garrison gave a small nod, as if he had expected that answer. "Then let's start with something simple," he said. "Breakfast?" Colby hesitated, then let out a small, reluctant smirk. "Depends. Do you even know how to cook, rich guy?" Garrison raised an eyebrow. "You'll find out soon enough." And for the first time in a long time, Colby felt something strange. Colby sat at the kitchen counter, watching as Garrison moved around with a kind of efficiency that seemed effortless. The kitchen was sleek, high-end appliances, marble countertops, cabinets that probably cost more than Colby's entire childhood apartment. Everything about this place screamed wealth, but there was something oddly quiet about it. Like a house meant for hosting, not for living. "You're seriously cooking?" Colby asked, raising an eyebrow. Garrison smirked slightly as he cracked an egg into a pan. "I know it's shocking, but I do, in fact, know how to make breakfast." Colby leaned back in his chair, sipping the coffee Garrison had given him earlier. "I figured you had some private chef or something." "I do," Garrison admitted, stirring the eggs. "But I also lived alone for a long time before I could afford one." Colby frowned, studying him. He hadn't really thought about it before, but now that he was here, sitting in his father's kitchen, watching him cook, he realized how little he actually knew about this man. He had always pictured Garrison as someone who had it all together, someone who had never struggled. But the way he spoke now, it didn't sound like that. "What was your life like before all this?" Colby asked, gesturing vaguely at the luxury surrounding them. Garrison glanced at him, as if debating how much to say. "Different," he finally said. "I grew up in a small town, not much money, not much opportunity. I worked my way through college, took a lot of risks, and eventually, those risks paid off." Colby raised an eyebrow. "So, what? You just worked hard and became a millionaire?" Garrison chuckled. "Not quite. There were failures. A lot of them. Times when I didn't know if I was going to make it. But I kept pushing forward." Colby took another sip of his coffee, thinking. He had spent so much time resenting this man, convinced that he had abandoned them to live a perfect life. But maybe Garrison's story wasn't as simple as he had assumed. A plate was placed in front of him, scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon. Nothing fancy, but it smelled amazing. Colby hesitated before picking up the fork. He had spent months scavenging for food, eating whatever he could find. The idea of a fresh, home-cooked meal, made specifically for him, felt almost foreign. But he took a bite, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. As they ate, the conversation drifted into unfamiliar territory. It wasn't forced or heavy, it was just normal. Colby found himself asking questions, learning little things about Garrison, things he never thought he would care about. And Garrison listened, too. Really listened. For so long, Colby had convinced himself that if he ever met his father, it would be a battle. That it would be nothing but anger, accusations, and regret. But sitting here now, eating breakfast together like they had done this 100 times before, he realized something. Maybe this didn't have to be war. Maybe it could be something else. After they finished, Garrison leaned back in his chair, watching Colby carefully. "I meant what I said last night," he said. "You don't have to decide anything right now. But if you want to stay, I'll help you get back on your feet. No strings attached." Colby studied him. "And if I decide to leave?" Garrison's expression remained steady. "Then I'll still help you." That answer surprised him. He had expected some kind of condition, some kind of guilt trip. But there was none. Just an open door. Colby looked down at his plate, his fingers tapping against the edge. "I don't know what I want yet," he admitted. Garrison nodded. "That's okay. Take your time. For the first time in months, Colby felt like he wasn't completely alone. And for now, that was enough. This story is about more than just a millionaire discovering his long-lost son, it's about redemption, forgiveness, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding something that was never supposed to be broken in the first place. Colby's journey is one of survival, of learning to trust again after a lifetime of disappointment. He doesn't just want a father, he wants answers, validation, proof that he mattered all along. And Garrison, a man who spent years chasing success, is forced to confront the consequences of a past he never even knew existed. What makes this story powerful is that there's no easy resolution. Trust isn't given overnight. Wounds don't heal just because someone apologizes. But there's hope, a chance for something real to grow between them, not because of obligation, but because both of them choose it. The ending isn't about a perfect, fairy tale reunion. It's about a beginning. Two people, both lost in their own ways, finding a way forward together. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any grand reconciliation. Because in the end, family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stay.